It is the final day within Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS Sprint Cup. One more race to come. Championships, though, already decided, because yesterday the overall title went the way for the third year in a row of Charles Weerts and Dries Van Thor. The Silver Cup already had been won by Ulysse de Pauw and Pierre-Alexandre Jean, and they actually won the race outright yesterday. And also yesterday we had Pro-Am titles resolved in favour of Miguel Ramos and Dean McDonald. It was a race yesterday where getting through traffic was really difficult. It underlined the importance of qualifying, and it underlines therefore the importance of what we have ahead of us for 20 minutes coming up very shortly, the last qualifying session of the season in Sprint Cup. There is one more round of Fanatec GT within Europe still to come. 2 weeks time we're at Barcelona for the last endurance round. Titles there of course still up for grabs. And there are the champions, Dries Van Thor and Charles Weerts, and for this session it will be Dries Van Thor who will drive the car. 20 minutes to determine the grid for today's final race. Gemma Scott in the pits, David Anderson and John Watson are trackside. And although, John, we don't have the drama of titles on the line today, because this is what we have now as the points going into the last race, what we do have is a race that we can just enjoy, and a qualifying session we can enjoy, because there are still drivers, of course, eager for a race win before the end of the season.
Very much so, and not least of all will be the 89 Mercedes. That was the car that was the principal challenger to the 32 Audi. And Timo Boguslawski qualified that car. Sadly, it was a poor qualifying. Further penalty put the car mainly at the back of the grid. So for this session, it's going to be Raffaele Marcello behind the wheel for qualifying, and one would expect, let alone hope, that we might see a Mercedes breaking through. It's been a wall of Audis, with the exception of one Ferrari. So how are you going to break through 6 Audis and a Ferrari to get onto the front row of the grid? Well, that's in the hands of Raffaele Marcello.
Talk us around the lap.
4 kilometers, 2.5 miles into the middle sector. This is the technical sector. No really quick, high-speed corners. Down the main straight and into turn 1. Be careful of the curbing on the inside. I understand that track limit observation is going to be focusing on turn 1 in particular. And we saw a plethora of penalties being handed out both in practice and qualifying, certainly in qualifying, and in the race for track limit abuse.
Yeah, yesterday, turn 6, up at the top of the lap, was a regular place where people ran wide, and turn 14, the last corner. But today, turn 1 is also being policed more attentively, should we say, from the judges of fact that are trackside, relaying the information to race control. Now, Raffaele Marcello there has got to be a real hero in this session, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, the disappointment, I'm sure he felt, seeing that they didn't have a chance. I mean, he did a great job when he was behind his driving stint. He just finished, I think, 7th, and that was just too far back. He needed to finish 6th or higher to keep his championship hopes alive. So he can redress all that here this morning in this qualifying session, and I'm sure that will be uppermost in his thoughts.
Ezequiel Perez Compact's car was in the barrier yesterday. Damage after he'd whacked a curb, or the car had whacked a curb, then affected the suspension. Fabian Schiller will drive in this session, but it's been rebuilt. We've had a couple of cars out on track already this morning just to do what's called the hardship lap, where if they were in real trouble yesterday, they're given 1 lap just to make sure that, for example, a new engine has been fitted properly, or big damage has been repaired satisfactorily, so that things don't go wrong and cause dramas when you get to the official track activity. So that is granted by the stewards, and those cars, having done a lap, are back into the pit lane. There you can see it, Curtis ASP, number 88, Tristan Vautier, and Jim Pla's car. No Jules Gounon this weekend. He tweaked his back at Hockenheim and wants to be fully fit for the final endurance race in a couple of weeks' time. So get well soon, Jules. And they're 188, the new Pro-Am champions, Dean McDonald and Miguel Ramos, and their Garage 59 McLaren will be out on track shortly. So drivers getting themselves ready. 20 minutes does not give you a huge amount of time, does it, to go for a lap time?
Not really, and it's a busy racetrack. It's not a very large racetrack, and one of the problems that we've seen throughout the weekend is how do you find a clear lap in qualifying, and how do you find any way of finding a way around another car if you're on a flying lap? So cars were being docked times, penalties, for interfering with another car's lap, and sometimes it was, well, I didn't see him, I didn't even know he was there, and there's a penalty applied to that particular driver car. So everybody's got to be on their toes, keep an eye out for what's not just ahead of you, but what's coming up behind you. And in particular, coming into turn 14, which is the final corner on the lap, drivers tend to back up a little bit to prepare for turn 14, and that's sometimes the area where a driver on a flying lap can feel that his time was impaired. So a lot for competitors at a relatively straightforward racetrack to keep a focus upon.
Now, talking penalties, this car gets a grid drop. Fred Verviche is going to drive Valentino Rossi's car, but yesterday they were rather in the wars. First of all, they were given a time penalty because Valentino didn't turn off the engine soon enough when he stopped for the pit stop. There was another time penalty for not slowing under a yellow flag, and unfortunately, because of behavioural warning points being totted up, there's a grid drop, isn't there, looming for that car for today's race?
I mean, the car actually is classified as last of the finishers, although it didn't finish last on the road. So I don't think anybody was picking on the 46 Audi in particular, but just a circumstance and a culmination of all those activities where penalties are applied resulted in that car being knocked to the very tail of the field. See what we're going to do this morning in qualifying. Fred Verviche hopefully will drag that car along with the number of Audis, 6 Audis in the top 8 cars in qualifying yesterday.
Well, the circuit will be live in 3 minutes. The fast lane is now open, so drivers, if they wish, can make their way down to the end of the pit lane. Ideally, you want to be first out, so you're in clear air, or last out, having let the traffic go. Track temperature 24 degrees. A little bit like yesterday morning. It's a bit overcast, but when the sun does break through, like it did yesterday afternoon, it becomes very hot.
It's very muggy. I mean, the air feels very heavy. So that in itself actually is no bad thing, because it does add fractionally to the levels of downforce, that denser air. It's just walking around. You walk about 5 paces and you feel you've walked all day.
Christopher Haase, you just saw, he had a good day yesterday to be second there. One of the 2 JP Motorsport McLarens. 111 is the Patrick Krupinski Christian Clean car, which yesterday won the Pro-Am part of the race ahead of the Ferraris. So yesterday, that was the class-winning car. Over its shoulder is 112, Dennis Lind and Vincent Abril, and it's going to be Vincent who will drive in this session. And Sky Tempesta, the end of its first season as a team with the Ferrari Haupt Racing team, running the car again this weekend. It's been a tough season for them, both in this and in British GT, but Chris Froggatt trying his all and eager to try to get that car up towards the pointy end of the grid within class. The Haupt Racing team mechanics then put the new tyres onto the car, and we'll send him out in about a minute and a half's time.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider that first time Sky Tempesta have had the Mercedes AMG GT3, and then you compare it to a Codus ASP, who have been running it for a number of years, and I mean, basically it's a perfect turnkey race car, but within that there are subtleties of setup and understanding and knowledge. And the Sky Tempesta team has gone through 3 different operations to try and find the magic that makes that car come alive. So no doubt they're getting there, but of course impatience is something that is preeminent in motorsport.
So Josh Kreuger getting ready to go in the GSM Nova Marine Lamborghini, a car that we only see in sprint. Danny Kreuss having driven the car in qualifying yesterday. At AF Corsa, you've got number 52, Andrea Bertolini and Louis Machiel's car, which had a spin yesterday. And then it had a further incident when there was contact between it and Dean McDonald's McLaren, for which Dean got a penalty. So the Sky Tempesta Mercedes AMG at the end of the pit lane, good to go. They're also away. Yesterday's winning car, Pierre-Alexandre Jean, at the wheel of the Ferrari. And all of a sudden, the pit lane bursts into life, doesn't it now, with 22 seconds to go before the pit lane opens. Tyres go on. There, the Klaus Bachler Giorgio Roda Porsche, which copped some damage yesterday. Over its shoulder is Adrian Delina's car, which crashed out on the first lap. That has been rebuilt, so the Dynamic Motorsport team had a miserable day yesterday and a very long night.
Indeed, that car had a lot of damage around the bodywork, concern also because of the location of the motor.
Green flag.
Would have been anything to the exhaust system and the motor itself, but I think it was more superficial, costly nevertheless, as the field now makes its way out onto the track for this 20 minutes qualifying session.
So this is Pierre-Alexandre Jean's view, making his way out onto the circuit. And 32, Dries van Thor sets off down the pit road, good to go.
It'll be interesting to see what Dries van Thor can do. Charles Fretz did a very good job at qualifying yesterday to get this car onto the front row of the grid. Pole time for yesterday, just out of interest, 1:30.467. So that'll be the time that teams will be using as a benchmark, and I'm assuming that conditions are fundamentally very similar to those on Saturday morning.
So you've got there number 54 Porsche ready to go, which is the Christian Engelhardt car. Tyres going onto it. And Klaus Bachler will drive 56. So they should be quick as long as they've got over the damage of yesterday. On Friday in the free practice and pre-qualifying sessions, the Porsches look to have good pace. But again, it does underline, doesn't it, that you have to have two evenly matched drivers. And that's where number 32 Audi has really scored, because there's relatively little disparity between a Vanthoor lap time and a Weertz lap time.
Yes, and I mean, that's the strength that WRT bring to their operation. And even this 53, the Ferrari, which won yesterday, the balance of driver ability and speed between Ulysse Power and Pierre-Alexandre Jean. So he's coming into the pit, so just an exploratory lap, and well, I don't know why they want to come in and check pressures and check tire temperatures, having there's a green flag being waved, just indicating the track is clear. So anyway, they've come in at the end of the first lap. I hope there's not a problem. It may just be simply just a quick check of the car and then send it back out again.
Matthew Drudy there running a little bit wide. So the car collection by Trésor Audi, that's white on one side, red on the other, accelerating its way now up through turn 5, traffic ahead. So the Porsche has ventured out onto the road just ahead, 54 then, which is the car that Klaus Bachler, Christian Engelhardt and Adrian Dedina share. But Drudy here had gone quickest in the first sector, but that time is now bettered by Raffaele Marciello. So Raffaele straight away, absolute best in sector 1. The road is busy straight away, and Drudy shares the car with Luca Giotto, and the Ferrari has ground to a halt by the look of it in the pit lane. So John was hoping there wasn't a problem, but it looks like there might be something amiss here.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very unusual to see a car stop at the entry into the pit lane, and whether that's mechanical, probably more likely electronic or something that can be quickly fixed. But to see a car coming in at the literally having just left the pit lane and come straight back in again, other than for the basic, what we would call in the trade a spanner check. So clearly it's more than a spanner check.
Right, well, first up, Matthew Drudy is going to offer a target time. Christopher Mies has done a 32.5. Matthew Drudy does a 32.074, and Raffaele Marciello should go quicker still then as he comes up towards the timing line for provisional pole position, a 1:31.789. And there is a very sorry sight. Yesterday's winning car, yesterday's pole car, pushed down the pit lane early in the session.
Surprise. I think that's the big, I mean, everybody in the pit lane will be surprised. So, quickest lap, first flying lap for Marciello, 1:31.7. And that's a considerable way, 1.3 seconds really off the time that we saw for qualifying pole position yesterday. Shelgaard, personal best overall in the middle sector in the McLaren. Now Patrick Niederhauser eclipses that, and it's just going to be purple all over the place for the next few moments until things settle down.
So Nikolai Kiergaard does a 1:31.586 there. Kicking up the dust is Patrick Niederhauser. So the Hockenheim endurance winner accelerates now towards turn 13. He's absolutely on the money here. Absolute best in the first sector, down a little bit in the second, but let's see where this lap time is going to put him then as he comes up towards the line. It's now greens because others are going quicker behind him, like Vincent Abril, but he goes second fastest then. Patrick Niederhauser, 1:31.628, 42 thousandths of a second shy of Nikolai Kiergaard.
Yeah, and that's the McLaren of Kiergaard who's gone quickest, 1:31.5. And expect to see that drop probably by up to a second before we get to the end of this 20-minute session.
Right, so you've got Kiergaard, Niederhauser, Marciello, Mies, Hauser, and then Dean McDonald sixth. Vincent Abril here, absolute best in the first sector. Remember, this is the car that he shares with Dennis Lynn that was good yesterday, was good at Hockenheim until they had a late race issue, and 2 purple sectors. So predicting here, pole position for this car.
Strong run for Vincent Abril. Clears turn 14, and now just the run to the start-finish line, so this should see him comfortably exceed the time Raffaele Marciello, and it does, 1:31.444. But it's not comfortably, it's by 79 hundredths of a second. Nevertheless, it's good enough.
Out and back at turn 1. And we've yet to get a time out of Nicholas Bart's Audi, and of course anything out of Pierre-Alexandre Jean. We understand it's a gearbox drama for the 53 Ferrari, the car that won yesterday. Number 99, which is Nicholas Scherl, being warned about going too wide at the first corner. And right now, there you can see Christopher Mies, who is down in the middle sector.
Yes, he lost just over a second. So this lap really is not going to be of any significance or consequence. Better to prepare, but Raffaele Marcello, purple sector, sector 1, now caught up behind the Porsche. That's going to take away time. You can see it's taking away 3500th of a second, and he's not going to be able to clear the Porsche before he comes across the start-finish line. So whether he wants to run as close as he is to try and get another run, but the difficulty is the Porsche is no slower in a straight line than the Mercedes is. And if he wants to get past, he's going to have to be courageous about it down into turn 1. And I don't think that's going to happen. On board with Dries van Thor. Personal best, middle sector, something that he probably will delete. And then he can go on and get his head down. So currently, the 32 is, where is it? Well, I can't even see it in the timing and scoring. It's that far down.
We are getting...
In fact, second quickest. Why did I miss that? A surprise.
3/10 down. We are getting lap times removed, but they're not affecting those at the pointy end of the grid just yet. Dries van Thor then goes through, and that lap, 1:32.577, a little bit slower than his earlier best. So it's Marcello, Van Thor, Dean McDonald, and there the Audi flung through turn 1. Having to fight the car a little bit there. Dean McDonald doing another of his outstanding jobs, third. You've got both Garage 59 McLarens, third and fourth, Dean McDonald, and then Nikolai Schiergaard behind him. As you look at Klaus Bachler, who is currently 5th fastest, make that 6th, because Dennis Marshall has just gone 3rd in his Audi.
Yeah, I mean, it's all changed literally by the car coming across the start-finish line. The two McLarens, 5th and 6th, only 4,000ths of a second splitting those two cars, which is pretty impressive, one has to say, for Garage 59. They've got those cars and their driver pairings absolutely on point.
Now, where's the next improver of note going to come from? Well, we need a time out of Pierre-Alexandre Jean, who is back out on circuit. He has just improved to go 8th fastest in the Ferrari, yesterday's winning car. Up to the timing line comes Klaus Bachler, goes 3rd, 1:31.561. So in the right hands, the Porsches are back in the hunt, whereas here, Dean McDonald, Pro-Am champion, now trying to get the car as high up the grid as he can, just to remind people of how good he is.
I think he's impressed a lot of people this season with his pace, and the more races he's doing, the more experience, particularly in the longer event sprint races, are more accustomed to what he's more accustomed to as Dries van Thor comes across the line, and I don't expect any change for him. So Raffaele Marcello back into the pits, and with just over 11 minutes of the session remaining. So changes, there's nobody looking right now other than Dennis Marshall, who's currently in 4th position. He's got 2 personal bests. Well, the middle sector just equals his personal best.
So up to the timing line comes the Attempto Audi. Second fastest, good effort. So now he is just over a 1/5 of a second back from Raffaele Marcello. We've got half the session still to go, so there's time for another set of tyres and another run. And there is the pole car currently, Raffaele Marcello in the pits. Now, what about Fred Verviche, bearing in mind that he gets a 5th place, or the car gets a 5th place grid drop? He's only 20th. And Pierre-Alexandre Jean, I mentioned, had gone 8th fastest, and he's still pushing, comes out of turn 14. So he's out of sequence with everybody else on this set of tyres, comes up towards the timing line, goes through, stays 8th.
Yeah, those 2 final sectors, wasn't able to find any additional performance, so the best personal sector to go back to Fred Verviche. So he is looking for significant improvement in time. He's only 20th position, and personal best by just under half a second in sector 1. Big drop off in the middle sector, again, inexplicable. There were no cars around him. A lot of dust being kicked up at the car that he is following a little bit further down the road. So into that final turn for Fred Verviche.
Dries van Thor, by the way, has just had a lap time disallowed for abusing track limits at turn 1. Verviche goes for the pit lane, and another set of tyres, and then another quick run to the checkered flag. So 26 cars, they've all now done a time, even with the dramas for Pierre-Alexandre Jean. This is the car that's at the foot of the times at the moment. Josh Kreuger in the GSM Nova Marine Lamborghini. First time out, whoops, a little bit sideways, but learning the car, learning the circuit.
Yes, back end snap rather abruptly there for Kreuger. It's not really something, it's not a comfortable situation. You don't want a car that's what I'd call a snappy, particularly the rear end breaking away like that. Doesn't give you the kind of level of confidence that you need to be able to lean on a car to get that confidence to be able to push the throttle pedal a little bit harder and use the steering wheel, which sounds obvious, but the 2 things that give driver confidence is turning the steering wheel and opening the throttle. If you can't do either of those two acts without confidence, then you're not going to go quickly.
Josh Kreuger, who's come out of Dutch club racing, things like BMWs, Mazda MX-5s, comes to the pit lane now as well, as you look at Christian Engelhardt doing exactly the same thing. So more and more of the drivers now coming to the pit lane for another set of tyres. It's going to be a really frantic final few minutes because we've got 8.5 left and only 2 cars are on the circuit. New tyres for Dries Van Thor. When I said that there were 2 cars on the circuit, make that 1, because another one, I think even Igor Walilko's Mercedes has just rumbled in. So there's only Andrea Bertolini on the track at the moment.
Well, he's just coming through turn 8. I can see that from commentary position. And I don't know whether Bertolini's really pushing particularly hard at the minute. He's in 24th. So 24th overall. And when this remaining field goes back on track, is going to be not quite pointless. You're going to be praying, whatever, that you're going to get at least half a lap cleared, because the rest of the lap is going to be somebody's going to be in your face.
Chris Froggatt's going out for another go, and Vincent Abril and Christian Kleen in their JP Motorsport McLarens are already out on track, so trying to get ahead of the wave of cars. Raffaele Marciello arguably doesn't have to go. He's ready. As soon as they put the wheels on, then they can send him out. He stays in the car. But if nobody gets near the time, well, will he go out just in case? Because the danger is it happens so late you can't get the tyres up to temperature. So it probably does make sense eventually to send him out to respond if possible. But if the feeling is that the session is getting slower, then keep a set of tyres for later on in the day. This is Andrea Bertolini then, who's won most things there are to win in a GT car, whether it's FIA GT, FIA GT1 World Championship, whether it's Pro-Am titles within Fanatec GT, or its earlier iteration. And with Louis Machiels, they've made a good partnership this year.
Yes, I mean, so much experience in the hands of Bertolini. In relation to what we had yesterday, the ambient and track temperatures are virtually identical. So probably the racetrack is in a very similar condition. So one would expect, with 6.5 minutes or so of the session remaining, to see a lap time drop. I mean, Marcello's sitting there maybe waiting for somebody to go out and challenge his provisional pole position. I think you want to be on track. I don't think you want to respond. I think you want to be out there looking for an improvement. If you wait to respond, you might have to wait. Well, that you might run out of time. And, well, there we go. He's running down the pit lane.
And as he did so, it looked like a rather dark cloud was above him there. It's still quite overcast and grey, leaden skies this morning, looking in certain directions. Right, here comes Bertolini up towards the timing line. And are we starting to see people piecing together quick laps? Not yet, but we will get there, I think, as Bertolini, 24th, heads towards the timing line. And that lap doesn't suggest of any improvement. The road, as you see, getting busier. Now there is Vincent Abril, who is 11th fastest and has done a personal best in the first sector. We're into the last 6 minutes of qualifying now.
So Abril has gained a little bit in sector 1, coming up to the conclusion of sector 2 as he picks up a bit of dust on the exit of the corner. So he's picked up time, just over 1/10 of a second in both those sectors. So Vincent Abril will be looking to improve on his present 11th position, grid position, so traffic ahead of him, which will interfere. If it doesn't interfere physically with the car, it certainly interferes with you as a driver, knowing, am I going to be losing time in this final sector? All the work I've done on those first 2 sectors comes across start. He goes 3rd quickest. He'll be happy with that.
That's a very good effort, assuming he can stay there. Yeah, absolutely, he will be happy, you're right. So putting Vincent Abril and Christian, Dennis Lind rather, up near the front of the grid is always a good thing, because they're both spectacular quick drivers. Vincent Abril, who's been a bit peripatetic in recent seasons, leaping from brand to brand, but he's found a happy home with JP Motorsport as Pierre-Alexandre Jean now tries to emulate Ulysse de Pau, but he's backed out of this lap because of the traffic ahead of him. So even though he's done a personal best, he bails because he can see what's up the road.
And the best thing is doing that is to save your tyres. If you've got a new set of tyres on, you don't want to waste it by running behind another car. Dries Van Thor has made an improvement in sector 1. The W-Watt, he already noticed this yesterday when Charles Fretz in particular was following behind Simon Gachet, was able to tuck the nose of the 32 Audi into the apex of turn 8 better than Simon Gachet could do. And again, looking at Dries Van Thor coming through second sector personal best, but not good enough, because The number 7 McLaren already's got a purple in that sector.
Yeah, 159 Nikolai Schiergaard, 7th fastest, and Christopher Hauser has done an absolute best in the first sector that's now bettered by Raffaele Marciello. The other reason that Pierre-Alexandre Jean backed out of that lap was it was going to be cancelled anyway because he'd run wide at turn 1, I understand. So over the timing line goes Van Thor. He goes second, provisionally. Nikolai Schiergaard goes quickest of all by 76 thousandths of a second. The McLarens are well hooked up this morning. But here is Christopher Hauser, who was good in sector 1, but he's down in the middle. So where does this put number 11 Audi? Christopher Hauser 11th at the start of the lap, and when he breaks the beam, that's going to put the Audi up to 5th fastest.
I mean, he lost that time in the middle sector. He clawed it back and a bit to spare. Klaus Bachler, likewise in the Porsche, currently 7th overall, looking to see improvement. Raffaele Marciello, purple sector in the middle sector, personal best first. So it's all beginning to ramp up as we go into the closing 3 minutes of qualifying.
So Bachler goes quickest, Marciello goes quickest, and the margin between them is 0.2 of a second. Raffaele Marciello again illustrating how quick he is and how different results could be for that car this year. Were Timur Boguslavski able to match Raffaele in qualifying, because you always have the disparity of grid position between them. Over the line goes Dean McDonald, he's 5th fastest now, so the Pro-Am champion goes 5th. And Dries Van Thor had done an absolute best in the first sector, but Christopher Hauser has gone quicker.
So Van Thor, personal best, and coming into turn 14, gives himself a nice gentle arc into the apex, then runs to the exit of the corner, and he will want to put that car onto the front row of the grid provisionally. Second quickest, third quickest, second row of the grid. That's disappointing for him.
So through goes then the McLaren, Nikolai Schiergaard 4th. Yves Witt looks on, Charles' dad, with Vincent Voss in the flat cap and the spectacles. There is Charles, who is either looking at the timing on his phone or busy updating Instagram. The new sprint champion, 3 in a row they have done, as Klaus Bachler presses on, but the Porsche losing ground in the middle sector. Raffaele Marciello also dropping a little bit of time in that middle sector. We've got time for 2 more laps out of the Porsche, but there's traffic up the road, including Fred Verviche, who's only 20th. He's having a rather frustrating morning in the Valentino Rossi Audi. The Monster Energy backed car comes over the line, but for Fred Verviche, 18th, a bit of an improvement. Marciello still the fastest. That lap was a 10th down on his best, and now Pierre-Alexandre Jean off the road and back on again. Again, hooked up in the first sector, but they're all losing time in the middle.
Mostly our Thomas Drouet has actually picked up at a time. One of the few that has picked up time at this late stage back end. Again, the Ferrari just a little unstable on the exit, so it'll take again another 100th or so of a second away from any potential improvement. Well, 20th up to 17th is not what they'd hoped after qualifying yesterday, but it's better than being 20th.
It is indeed, as over the timing line goes Thomas Drouet up to 6th fastest. Christian Engelhardt's just gone 7th behind him. And there is number 54, Christian Engelhardt, who has gone back up the order. Now, why is that? It is because Drouet's lap time was cancelled for exceeding track limits. That's why.
So he drops all the way back down to 12th place, having done the hard yards. Christian Engelhardt currently in 6th position. Looks to see an improvement, but that middle sector again is damaging so many. Goes to 6th. So it's just damaging so many people's attempts, or whether it's because, I suppose, it's either overdriving or they haven't just got the kind of balance that they want on that middle sector. But Niederhauser, well, currently 5th quickest, likes the first sector a lot.
He does, you're right. So 10th up there, and Patrick Niederhauser 5th. So it's Mercedes, Audi, Porsche, McLaren, Audi, Porsche, McLaren, Audi, Audi, McLaren, Audi, Audi, Mercedes, Audi, McLaren, Mercedes, Audi, Ferrari, Mercedes, Mercedes, Ferrari, Audi, Audi, Ferrari, Mercedes, Lamborghini. Checkered flag is out. Niederhauser again junks time in the middle sector,
and that's quite a lot of time, just over 0.3 of a second, and to claw that back, a certain amount of it anyway, to put himself into a position to challenge for the second row of the grid. It is doable. Can he move up from 5th? No.
Had a go, didn't he? And the lap time was better, but he stays where he was in the times. Teammate Nicholas Bart comes across the timing line, and then behind for the pit lane goes Dries Van Thor. So Raffaele Marciello Point for pole, but little good will it do him because the championship fight was lost yesterday. He needed, with Van Tor and Weerts being third, to be sixth, and after all the penalties post-race, they got up to seventh. So near and yet so far. Klaus Bachler, third. Improvement in sector 1, but sector 2 is where people have been losing time.
Interesting, Bachler, when he came the exit of turn 8, did not run as wide as his feet. Other car driver packages do. Does coming through in turns 11 and 12. Then again, he's lost a quarter of a second, so any prospect of Bachler improving on his current third quickest time, probably unlikely. 0.2 of a second, too much to claw back as the 46 Audi goes into the pit lane, and that'll be a disappointing qualifying for Fred Vish, albeit he's up to 11th position.
But then there is, yes, 11th in the times, the grid drop to come, so he slides back down the pole. There, Dennis Marshall, 6th at the end of the session. Somebody that just gets better and better and better, as that's your pole position driver, Raffaele Marciello, then, for the Acodis ASP Mercedes AMG team. Takes off his helmet, job done, and by just under 0.2 of a second, pole position goes the way of the Italian.
Just to compare the times between Marciello today, a 30.6, and Boguslawski yesterday, a 31.1. That half second is the difference between starting on pole and starting in the case of Boguslawski back in the 10th row of the grid, albeit he had a penalty to add in as well.
So Raffaele Marciello is fastest at the end of Q2, ahead of Dries van Thor, Klaus Bachler third. Great effort by Nikolai Kjærgaard to go fourth, ahead of Patrick Niederhauser. Dennis Marshall rounding out the top 6 from Christian Engelhardt, then Christopher Hauser, who dropped away a little bit, as did Dean McDonald, but he's in the top 10 ahead of Christopher Mies. Fred Vish 11th fastest with a grid drop to come. Then it's Vincent Abril from Mathieu Drudy, who never really clicked in that session. Thomas Drouet 14th, and Benjamin Goethe is 15th fastest. 16th quickest is Christian Klein. And behind him, the Mad Panda Motorsport Mercedes, Fabian Schiller doing the driving. Pierre-Alexandre Jean only got the Ferrari that won yesterday to 18th, so a bad start to the day, outpacing Cedric Sprazioli's Ferrari. Tristan Vautier a long way back, 20th for Acodis ASP. Igor Walilko next from Nicholas Bart, Nicholas Scherl with Andrea Bertolini 24th, Chris Froggett's Mercedes 25th, and Josh Kreuger 26th. But Raffaele Marciello is the man of the morning. He is on pole position.
Lello, on the radio there, we were hearing you say, you want faster? I'll go faster.
No, this track is kind of strange because everyone improves a lot in the second set. We saw it yesterday, and today was the same. I mean, it's just like you have more grip, more confidence with track limits and stuff, so everyone is improving, yeah.
And of course, you're still pushing on for the combined championship.
Yeah, it's a good point for the overall championship, and I mean, we know in sprint when you start in front, it's much easier, so it will be much better for today.
Thank you. Have a great race.
Thank you.
So very happy Raffaele Marciello. And the point that Gemma Scott makes about the combined championship, the overall championship, is that you take, yes, there's an endurance, and yes, there is a sprint competition, but then you add the two together, and that, as well as the endurance crown, of course, still up for grabs. The teams are back in Spain in 2 weeks' time for that endurance final round. Let's look at the highlights then of qualifying, which ultimately saw Raffaele Marciello go fastest. The battle for pole position, partly Raffaele Marciello and partly this man, Dries van Thor, winning the championship yesterday. Yesterday's pole carbo, an early gearbox problem, bringing Pierre-Alexandre Jean slowly into the pit lane, and track limit defences going against him late in the session, so the Ferrari only 18th. Dean McDonald was quick early doors, so too was Klaus Bachler, and Bachler rounding out the top 3. Good effort too by Nikolai Kjærgaard's Garage 59 McLaren, 4th fastest for number 159. So Kjærgaard 4th, Bachler 3rd. This car, Dries van Thor's Audi, rattling over the curb and on target for 2nd on the grid. And Raffaele Marciello taking pole position by 0.194 of a second. We'll be on air at 1:15 local time for race 2, the final race of the Sprint Cup season. We'll see you for that later on, but for now, it's from all of us here, goodbye.